Hello everybody, Tiernan and I are back with the next Shadowlands Dungeon Trash Guide. Today we'll be examining the trash mobs from Mists of Tirna Scithe in Ardenweald, focusing on all their spells, abilities, buffs, and debuffs, and how to deal with them.
Don't forget, you can check us out on Twitch at twitch.tv/Jedith and twitch.tv/TalonX, where you'll find us running Mythic Plus multiple days a week. If you're looking to learn more about the new Shadowlands content, have questions about anything in this video, or you're looking for a community of people to play with in the new expansion, be sure to stop by and say hi.
As we go through this video, if there's something we've missed or you have any other thoughts, feel free to let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear any feedback you might have, and don't forget there is a spreadsheet linked below with all the information in written form. One last thing, since this footage is from beta, things are subject to change, so keep that in mind. And with all of that said, let's get into the trash guide for the Mists of Tirna Scithe.
First up is the Tiernan Villager. This mob is debuffed with Soul Shackle that causes it to be hostile towards players until its health is reduced to around 20% when it becomes friendly and casts Refreshing Mists, healing the party for a small amount of their health over time. While hostile, the Tiernan Villager will cast two abilities. Overgrowth selects a random target, slowing their movement speed by 50% and inflicting a moderate amount of nature damage every 1 second for 5 seconds. After the cast is complete, the target will be stunned for 6 seconds or until the overgrowth has been destroyed. Bewildering Pollen expels a frontal cone after a 3.5 second cast that inflicts a large amount of nature damage in a frontal cone and disorients anyone caught within it. Neither of these abilities are interruptible, and the Tiernan Villager is not CCable in any way.
Next we have the Drust Spikeclaw. These aberrations are susceptible to all CC effects and have one ability and one on-death debuff. Bloodletting is an instant cast ability that causes the Spikeclaw to leap to a random player and inflict physical damage to all players within 4 yards, leaving behind a physical damage dot, dealing damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. Upon death, the Spikeclaws debuff players within 30 yards with Dying Breath. This curse increases damage taken by 10% for 30 seconds, and it stacks. Make sure to dispel the curse if you're able before heading into the next pack.
Drust Soul Cleavers are up next. These can be CC'd and have two abilities to note. Soul Split strikes the highest threat target with a moderate amount of shadow damage and increases damage taken by 20% for 8 seconds. This effect does stack and is dispellable. Hand of Thros increases the Soul Cleaver's size and attack speed by 30%. During this time, successful melee attacks heal the caster for 3% of their maximum health.
Drust Harvesters can be stunned, displaced, and otherwise CC'd, and cast 2 interruptible spells. Harvesters mainly spam cast Spirit Bolt, which inflicts a random target with shadow damage after a 3-second cast time. Interrupt as many casts as you can to lessen the magic damage output. Harvest Essence is a 6-second channel that inflicts a small amount of shadow damage to all players every 0.5 seconds and heals for 100% of the damage done. Make sure you stop this cast, otherwise they'll heal back to full health.
The Drust Bowbreaker cannot be CC'd and has two abilities to keep in mind. Bramble Burst causes brambles to erupt beneath players' feet, inflicting nature damage every 0.5 seconds and slows movement speed by 60%. It is possible to avoid all damage if you're quick on your feet. At 50% health, the Bowbreaker will cast Furious Thrashing, inflicting physical damage to all players within 50 yards every 1 second for 6 seconds. Now, just before the first boss, you will encounter two of these at once. Time-wise, it's preferable to DPS them down evenly and use healing CDs or defensives to deal with the incoming damage. If the damage proves to be too much, then offset the damage by focusing one at a time.
As you enter into the guessing game Gauntlet, you'll encounter a number of different mobs, and have the chance to also encounter one of 3 different mini-bosses. The next few rooms will contain mob packs with a mixture of Mistfill Guardians, Tenders, Stalkers, Stingers, and Shapers. All of these mobs can be stunned, disoriented, and knocked back. First up, you'll face the Mistveil Defender. These simple mobs can be CC'd and have one ability, Spear Flurry. Spear Flurry is an instant cast ability that inflicts physical damage in a frontal cone for 4 seconds. Either sidestep the cone, or use your stuns, knockbacks, and disorients to interrupt the ability.
Mistveil Stalkers cast Mistveil Bite. After 1.5 seconds, the Stalker will teleport to a random player and inflict physical damage, and leave behind a bleed, dealing damage every 3 seconds for 12 seconds. The bleed can stack if you're unlucky enough to be chosen by more than one Stalker. You are able to stun the Stalker before the cast goes off, but more than likely you'll want to save the CC for more impactful abilities from the other Mistveil mobs.
Mistvale Tenders will cast Nourish the Forest, healing nearby enemies for 3% of their max health every 1 second for 9 seconds. Interrupt this cast or purge the buff if it goes off to stop the healing. Mistfill Guardians will often cast Bucking Rampage. During the course of this ability, the Guardian will inflict a moderate amount of physical damage and knock back a different player caught in the circle every 1 to 3 seconds. Stuns, knockbacks, and disorients will stop this ability and allow you to stay in range to damage the mobs.
Mistspell Shapers will attempt to cast Bramblethorn Coat. This ability will shield an ally absorbing damage. When the shield is removed either by damage or a purge, it will trigger Bramblethorn Entanglement. Entanglement inflicts a small amount of nature damage every 2 seconds and roots all players within 30 yards for 8 seconds. This ability is not incredibly impactful on its own, but if you happen to be rooted during Bucking Rampage or Spear Flurry, it can become messy. It is best to simply interrupt this cast before it goes off, else you run the risk of being comboed by the other abilities.
The last of the Mistvale mobs is the Mistspell Stinger. The Stinger will cast Anima Injection, inflicting a random target with nature damage every 1 second for 6 seconds. If Anima Injection expires, Anima Detonation is triggered. Anima Detonation inflicts a small amount of nature damage to everyone within 8 yards. To avoid the damage, you can simply dispel the magic debuff.
If you're lucky enough to encounter one of the mini-bosses through this guessing game gauntlet, the Mistspell Night Blossom is one of the possibilities. The Night Blossom will often inflict the highest threat target with Triple Bite. This ability inflicts 3 simultaneous bites, each inflicting a moderate amount of nature damage instantly and a small amount of nature damage every 5 seconds for 18 seconds. This poison does a ton of damage as every attack inflicts 3 stacks and can continue to stack if not dispelled. As we were testing this mob, you could just outrange this ability and not take any damage. Once you have enough threat, just stay away and let the rest of the party deal damage. Poisonous Discharge fires globules of poison at players, inflicting a small amount of nature damage instantly, and then nature damage every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. Just dodge the green circles and avoid all damage.
The Mistfill Gorge Gullet will inflict the highest threat target with Tongue Lashing. This ability inflicts a large amount of nature damage in a 12-yard frontal cone. Players hit also suffer a 20% movement impairment for 8 seconds. The tank can outrange this ability and avoid all damage. Just make sure no one else is standing in front to avoid the damage from the frontal cone. The Mistfill Gorge Gullet will also cast Poisonous Secretions. This will inflict a moderate amount of nature damage to everyone within 12 yards of the mini-boss and will also leave behind a dot, inflicting small amounts of nature damage every 3 seconds for 18 seconds. Just outdistance the cast before it goes off to avoid the damage.
The last of the mini-bosses is the Mistspell Matriarch. This mob will cast Shred Armor, which inflicts a large amount of physical damage to the highest threat target and increases their damage taken by 20% for 20 seconds. The Shred Armor debuff does stack and can be outranged by the tank. Do note that if the highest threat target is not within range of the ability, it will choose a random target within range and strike them instead. If the tank is taking too much damage from this ability, you can let another target take the hit, but it could be a gamble if the damage instead one-shots someone else. Radiant Breath is a frontal cone that inflicts a large amount of nature damage after a 3-second cast and disorients anyone caught within the blast for 5 seconds. Make sure you're not struck by this by moving out of the way. Lastly, the Matriarch will cast Pool of Radiance. After a 2.25 second cast, the Matriarch will create a pool, healing anyone standing within it for 4% of their max health every 1 second. And yes, this will heal players if they stand within it as well, so move the Matriarch out and have everyone stand in it when possible to gain a free heal. It is important to note that after the Matriarch casts Pool of Radiance, she'll often stand in the pool and cast another ability, making it difficult for her to not receive healing from this ability. Do your best to kite her away so she receives as little healing as possible from this ability.
As we enter into this last area, you'll first encounter the Spine Maw Staghorn. This beast is immune to all CC and will cast 2 abilities to aid its allies. Stimulate Regeneration is an 8-second interruptible channel that heals all allies within 30 yards every 2 seconds for 8 seconds, and Stimulate Resistance is a 2.5-second interruptible cast that shields all nearby allies. These shields are dispellable. The Spine Maw Acid Gullet is fully susceptible to CC and has 1 ability to watch out for. Volatile Acid is a 2-second uninterruptible cast that debuffs a random player, causing nature damage to them and anyone caught in the 8-yard circle every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. This debuff did not appear to be dispellable, so don't share the damage with your friends by standing in the circle.
The Spine Maw Gorger can be CC'd and will cast Acid Globule. This ability targets a random player and lobs a projectile towards them. Upon landing, it will explode, dealing nature damage and knocking back anyone standing in the 8-yard circle. Take care not to be caught in this circle, as it is fairly easy to be knocked off to your death in this area. The last worm-type mob in this area is the Spine Maw larva. This simple worm only melees, so place your focus elsewhere and passively cleave these little ones down.
And finally, the last mob you'll come across in this dungeon is the Spine Maw Reaver. These flying creatures are able to be CC'd and will cast Stinging Assault. This dispellable poison inflicts a random target with debilitating poison, dealing a small amount of nature damage every 2 seconds, and decreases movement speed by 10% for 12 seconds.
Well, that's all for the Mists of Tirna Scithe and all the abilities, spells, debuffs, buffs, and general tips for all the trash within. We hope this information proves useful to you as you begin to tackle the dungeons in Shadowlands. If you have any thoughts or comments about this video, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you can be informed when our next video is available. The next Shadowlands Dungeon Trash Guide covering the Necrotic Wake will be out soon. Until then, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.